If you want to influence people and get them to say yes to what you need, the first thing I'll tell you is having good ideas isn't enough. You have to know how to present them. There are strategies that work both in everyday life and in more strategic situations. Let me break down exactly how you can use these techniques in a subtle but highly effective way. The first thing I've learned is that emotions always speak louder. Everyone likes to think they're rational, but the truth is, we're all guided by how we feel. Want to convince someone? Make them feel something first. A touching story, a phrase that sparks empathy, or even a small act of kindness can work wonders. Logic comes afterward, like a support beam. First, you connect emotionally, then you persuade. Another key point, people can't resist charisma. And by charisma, I don't mean being the funniest or most extroverted person in the room, as many people assume. True charisma is about making others feel comfortable and valued in your presence. It's about the energy you bring and how genuinely you connect with others. Building trust is the first step, and it often starts with the smallest gestures that go unnoticed. When you're in a conversation, make eye contact. This simple act shows confidence and genuine interest. Don't check your phone or look away, as that can come across as uninterested or even insecure. Show that you're truly listening to what the other person has to say. Too often, we're so focused on planning our next response that we forget to actually listen. Ask thoughtful questions that show curiosity, like, how did you come to that conclusion? Or what do you think could be done differently? These questions keep the conversation flowing and make the person feel important. Be confident in what you say, even if you're not entirely sure about the topic. Speak clearly and with conviction. Confidence in communication often outweighs the actual content. But here's a word of caution. Confidence doesn't mean arrogance or dominating the conversation. The key is balancing confidence with empathy. Believe in what you're saying, but also leave room to hear and validate the other person's opinions. Have you ever heard of the power of reciprocity? It's one of the most fascinating principles of human interaction. It works like this. When you offer something first, people feel an almost automatic need to give something back. It's like an unwritten social code. From a young age, we learn that when we receive something, we're expected to give something in return. This can be a favor, a useful piece of information, or even a simple act of attention. A genuine compliment, like saying, "I really admire how you handled that situation," plants a seed that almost always grows into a reciprocal action. But here's the catch. Reciprocity only works if it's authentic. Don't try to force it or be manipulative, because people can sense that a mile away. Your generosity should feel natural, almost as if you're not expecting anything in return. A favor done with ulterior motives can work in the short term, but people will eventually pick up on it and feel used. Instead of opening doors, you might end up closing them. Here's a little-known secret about reciprocity. It doesn't have to be grand. Small gestures are often more effective than big favors. Something as simple as saying, "I thought this might help you," paired with a helpful action, can create a powerful connection. For instance, sharing an interesting article or sending a sincere thank you message can leave a lasting impression. These small gestures create a sense of goodwill in the other person, but in a light, positive way. Now, let me tell you about a trick I find absolutely brilliant. Contrast. It's so simple, yet so effective, and it works because of how our brains are wired to compare things. Here's the idea. You start by presenting an option that seems exaggerated, difficult, or even outright impossible to accept. Then, right after, you follow up with a second option that is far more reasonable and attainable. What happens next is fascinating. The brain automatically compares the two, and the second option suddenly feels not just acceptable, but in many cases, appealing. Think about this in action. Let's say you need a coworker to help you with a project. Instead of jumping straight to your actual request, you start with something intentionally over the top. For example, you might ask them to take on a major responsibility that requires an enormous time commitment, something you know they're likely to decline. When they inevitably say no, you can then pivot to your real request, which is something much smaller, like assisting you for a couple of hours. To them, the second request feels much more manageable and reasonable by comparison. And here's the kicker. They're now more likely to agree because the first request made the second one seem like a no-brainer. This technique works in so many scenarios because it's rooted in the way people process decisions. Our brains don't evaluate options in isolation. Instead, we rely on context. If the first option sets the bar absurdly high, the next one will seem not only doable but often even generous. This contrast effect isn't limited to requests at work. It's just as effective in negotiations, sales, and even everyday interactions. Let me give you another example, one that's even more relatable. Imagine you're negotiating the price of a car. The salesperson starts by showing you a model with all the upgrades, leather seats, the latest tech, and a price tag to match. It's beautiful, but it's also way beyond your budget. After you hesitate, they compromise by showing you a more basic model that still meets your needs, but costs significantly less. Because they anchored you to the higher price first, the lower-priced car now feels like a bargain, even if it's still a bit higher than what you initially planned to spend. This is contrast in action, and it's everywhere once you start noticing it. And of course, you can't overlook the importance of understanding who's in front of you. No one likes to be treated like just another face in the crowd. If you want to be persuasive, study the person. Understand their values, their desires, and even their fears. You don't need to be a psychology expert, but pay attention. Emotional people respond well to heartfelt stories, while rational individuals need data, logical arguments, and clear reasoning. The key is to speak their language. Another detail many people forget is timing. Pushing too hard isn't always the best approach. Sometimes the other person just needs time to think, or might not be in the right frame of mind to listen. This takes patience and observation. But when you nail the timing, your chances of getting what you want increase significantly. And lastly, never, absolutely never, admit that you are using strategies to influence people. This is a crucial point because the moment someone realizes they are being intentionally influenced, your credibility can completely fall apart. People like to feel that they have control over their decisions and actions, and any hint of manipulation can spark distrust, resistance, or even emotional distance. It's like pulling back the curtain and revealing the backstage of a play. The magic vanishes. If someone questions your intentions, the best approach is to be transparent about the values behind your actions without revealing that you're deliberately applying a strategy. For instance, if you're asked why you gave a compliment or used a specific approach, explain that you genuinely value the person and wanted to express that. Show them that what you're doing comes from a place of respect and empathy, not an attempt to control. The way you respond in these situations can even strengthen the trust between you, as long as it's handled with care and sincerity. These techniques work because they're rooted in what drives people: emotions, reciprocity, trust, and the need to feel understood. Use them wisely and respectfully, and you'll be amazed at the impact you can make.